Children's laughter and that familiar jingle on a summer afternoon. Some memories feel untouchable. But behind the ice cream truck song we all chased is a secret almost no one was taught. In 1916, this exact melody was released under a title so vile it cannot be said casually. It was written to mock and dehumanize Black Americans at the height of Jim Crow. The real story of this anthem is not about childhood joy, but about how innocence can be laced with cruelty, and why most people never heard the truth until now. If you thought you knew this tradition, you are not ready for what comes next. The sound always arrived before the truck itself. A distant melody floating through the heat, drifting over yards and sidewalks, sending kids into a frenzy. Some dropped what they were doing and tore down the block, shoelaces untied, hearts pounding. Others pressed their faces to window screens, begging parents for loose change, scrambling through couch cushions for quarters and dimes. There was never enough time. The song seemed to speed up as the truck neared the corner, a warning that if you did not hurry, you would miss your chance. Bare feet slapped against pavement still warm from the sun. Someone always yelled, "Wait for me," as friends gathered at the curb, breathless and sticky with sweat. The ice cream truck was more than a rolling freezer. It was a moving landmark that drew everyone out of their houses from every block and backyard. Neighbors exchanged greetings in the shade. Little kids clung to older siblings, clutching crumpled bills in their fists, already tasting the cold sweetness to come. The driver knew most of them by name. He would remember who liked Rocket Pops, who wanted a Choco Taco, who needed their cone dipped in chocolate and then rolled in nuts. No one cared about the heat or the dust or the way the truck's engine sputtered as it idled. For those few minutes, there was only the jingle, the promise of a treat, and the feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself. Even the grown-ups lingered, swapping stories, laughing at the chaos. The music stitched the whole neighborhood together, a signal that summer was here, that childhood was still safe and simple, and that joy could be summoned by the sound of a song and the rush to the curb. In those moments, nothing else mattered. There is a kind of trust built into the sound of that jingle, an unspoken agreement that the world, at least for a moment, is exactly as it should be. The ice cream truck does not just hand out cones and popsicles, it delivers a piece of summer that feels untouched by worry. Parents wave from porches, confident that nothing bad can happen at the curb. Kids compare dollar bills and debate flavors, their arguments forgotten as soon as the freezer opens. The music means everyone belongs, at least for those few minutes. This ritual becomes a thread in the fabric of childhood, woven so tightly that it is hard to imagine summer without it. The song is background noise for growing up, something so familiar it barely registers. It is there in sunburned faces and sticky hands, in the way a neighborhood gathers around a single truck and calls it their own. The jingle carries a promise that joy is simple, that happiness can be summoned just by listening for the right tune. No one asks where the melody comes from or why it feels so timeless. It has just always been there, as natural as the taste of vanilla or the feel of hot pavement under your feet. The innocence of the ritual is its power. It is a memory passed from one generation to the next, a shorthand for safety and belonging. But when a symbol feels this safe, it is easy to stop questioning it. The song becomes invisible, its meaning taken for granted. That is how it slips into the background, not just as music, but as a piece of childhood we never think to examine. What happens when something so pure turns out to have a history no one warned you about? The answer is coming, and it will change how you hear that melody forever. Long before the ice cream truck, the melody that now rings through American neighborhoods was already everywhere. In the early 1800s, fiddlers played it at barn dances and county fairs, their bows gliding through a tune that was bright, quick, and impossible to forget. It started out as a folk song, passed from hand to hand, known by different names in different places. Some called it Natchez Under the Hill, others knew it as the Rose Tree Hub. But by 1834, it appeared in sheet music as Old Zip Coon. The notes leapt and dipped in a pattern made for dancing, easy for crowds to clap along. Musicologist Dale Cockrell demonstrates how those first strains, simple, repetitive, and built for distance, made the melody stick. He traces its shape, an opening phrase that rises then tumbles down, repeating in a way that children and adults could hum after a single hearing. The structure, A-A-B-B, was perfect for square dances and parades, looping just long enough to keep feet moving and spirits high. This was music designed to travel, to be heard above laughter and conversation, to cut through the noise of a busy fairground or a crowded street. By the mid-19th century, the tune had found a permanent place in American life. It showed up in songbooks, on broadsides, and in the repertoires of traveling musicians. Rural communities used it for dances, and city performers adapted it for stage acts. Its public domain status meant anyone could play it, print it, or tweak it for their own purposes. No permissions, no royalties, just a melody that belonged to everyone. The song's cheerful bounce, its familiar intervals, and its ability to carry over long distances made it a staple for any gathering that needed energy and unity. It was played on fiddles, whistled by children, and later arranged for brass bands and early mechanical music boxes. By the time the 20th century arrived, Turkey in the Straw was woven into the soundscape of America, so familiar that nobody stopped to ask where it came from. Its journey from folk roots to national earworm was complete, and the stage was set for what would come next. By the 1830s, the melody that once drifted through barn dances had taken a darker turn. Minstrel shows swept across America, filling theaters with white performers in blackface, their faces smeared with burnt cork, their voices exaggerated into cruel mimicry. The stage name Zip Coon became shorthand for a racist caricature, a black man stumbling through city life, mocked for every word and gesture. The tune, called Old Zip Coon, was the soundtrack for these performances. Audiences clapped along as actors sang about ignorance and greed, spinning tales that justified slavery and segregation. Posters from the time show grinning, bug-eyed figures clutching watermelons or fried chicken, each image reinforcing the lie that black people were less than human. Scholar Eric Lott describes how these shows worked as a machine, churning out songs and jokes that seeped into everyday life. William J. Mahar traces how the music industry cashed in, printing sheet music and selling out theaters coast to coast. The melody's bounce made it irresistible, but the words were poison. By the turn of the 20th century, blackface minstrelsy was America's most popular entertainment, and Turkey in the Straw was its anthem. In 1916, the melody reached its most explicit form. Columbia Records released a song performed by Harry C. Brown, a banjo player and baritone whose voice was already familiar from vaudeville stages. The title, "Nigger Love a Watermelon, Ha, Ha, Ha," left nothing to the imagination. Brown's recording, catalog number A297, set the Turkey in the Straw tune to lyrics that openly mocked Black Americans, calling watermelons the colored man's ice cream. The record was not a fringe artifact. It was promoted in trade journals as a treat to tickle the musical palates of those who love old-time slave day river songs. Dealers from New York to Chicago stocked it in their windows. The same year, lynching statistics reached a grim peak. Over 50 Black Americans were murdered by mobs, their killers rarely prosecuted. The song played in homes and parlors as newspapers reported the violence, each reinforcing the other. Historians point to this record as the smoking gun. The melody that would become the ice cream truck jingle was, for millions of listeners, first and foremost a soundtrack to racial terror. The commercial success of Brown's recording proved there was money to be made in dehumanization. The industry did not hide this history, it sold it. And as the years passed, the melody traveled, stripped of its words but not its meaning, ready to be repackaged for the next generation. Every artifact in this story comes from a chain of careful sourcing and legal review. The 1916 Harry C. Brown recording, with its unmistakable melody, was pulled directly from the Library of Congress Recorded Sound Research Center. Their archivists confirmed the original matrix number cataloged as Columbia A2297 and provided digital transfers and catalog scans. For minstrel posters and sheet music, curators at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture guided the selection, ensuring each image's provenance could be traced to public collections. All material predating 1923 is in the public domain, but every item, down to the last scan, was reviewed by counsel before appearing here. Columbia Records' historic catalogs, now managed by Universal Music Group, were accessed through University Microfilm Archives. Rights specialists at UMG cross-checked the Brown recording's status, confirming no restrictions after 1923. This evidence was methodically cleared. For clarity, a legal review packet was assembled, including transfer receipts from the Library of Congress, copyright expiration documentation, and signed statements from institutional curators. These steps were not just procedural, they were necessary to present racist artifacts, lyrics, images, and recordings in a way that acknowledges harm without sensationalizing it. Smithsonian curators weighed in on display ethics, advising on context and language for each archival item. Their expertise shaped how the material is shown and discussed, reinforcing the difference between documenting history and exploiting pain. Legal counsel reviewed the entire evidence sequence and flagged any image or lyric that risked re-traumatizing viewers without clear educational purpose. This process means every visual and audio sample in this film is accounted for, sourced, cleared, and presented with full transparency. The record of how these materials were obtained and vetted is as important as the artifacts themselves. The goal is not just to show the evidence, but to do so with the rigor and respect that this history demands. Ice cream trucks did not choose their music by accident. For independent operators, every decision down to the jingle was shaped by the realities of the business. The melody had to do more than announce ice cream. It needed to cut through traffic, reach kids half a block away, and trigger instant recognition. In the 1950s, as suburban sprawl changed the shape of American neighborhoods, vendors searched for a sound that could travel farther than a bell or a shout. Mechanical music boxes, first imported from Europe, offered a solution. They were loud, reliable, and easy to install. But the real draw was economic. Playing a song in the public domain meant there were no licensing fees to pay. Turkey in the Straw fit perfectly. It was so familiar that trade journals for vending machine operators recommended it as the default. The tune's high-pitched notes carried over lawns and driveways, and its rhythm was simple enough to be reproduced by even the cheapest speaker system. For most operators, the goal was survival, not reinvention. The profit margin on a single scoop or popsicle was thin. Every extra cost, like paying ASCAP or BMI for copyrighted music, cut into already tight earnings. Public domain songs like Turkey in the Straw became the industry safety net. Vendors could buy a pre-programmed music box, mount it above the cab, and drive off without worrying about monthly bills or cease and desist letters. The melody's association with fairs, cartoons, and old-time Americana made it feel like a safe bet. It was nostalgia in a box, ready to be sold with every cone. Manufacturers like Nichols Electronics capitalized on this demand, advertising their music boxes as the gold standard for mobile vending. Their catalogs from the 1950s and the 1960s featured Turkey in the Straw as the first track, promising maximum reach and instant customer recognition. Trade publications described the tune as proven, and operators swapped stories about how a familiar jingle could turn a slow afternoon into a profitable route. The music's ability to carry over a quarter mile meant fewer missed sales and more impulse buys. Operators did not have to explain the song's history to customers, they just needed it to work. There was no industry-wide conversation about where the melody came from or what it once represented. The priority was practical: keep costs low, keep kids coming, and keep the wheels turning. As the decades passed, the original associations with minstrelsy faded from public memory, replaced by images of summer and childhood. The industry's silence on the song's past was not a formal policy. it was an economic calculation. By choosing a tune that was free, familiar, and effective, vendors sanitized its origins without ever acknowledging them. The melody's dark history was scrubbed away for the sake of commerce, leaving only the sound that signaled ice cream was near. For the drivers who spent their days behind the wheel, the jingle was just another tool, no different from the freezer or the cash box. The song's power to unite a neighborhood, to draw out kids and parents, made it indispensable. Few questioned whether the joy it inspired came at someone else's expense. The economic engine of the ice cream truck industry ran on the assumption that what was familiar was harmless. That assumption went unchallenged for generations, even as the melody's true story waited just beneath the surface. A melody can wound without ever raising its voice. For Black families, the ice cream truck song was never just a harmless jingle. It was a reminder, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, of what it meant to live in a world that found joy in your pain. Elders remember those hot afternoons when children's laughter mixed with a tune that once filled minstrel halls with jeers. They remember standing at the edge of the yard, watching their children join the crowd at the curb, knowing the music that summoned them was built on mockery and violence. One grandmother, Mrs. Thelma Johnson, recalls the ache of seeing her grandchildren race out the door, coins clutched tight, the melody echoing down the block. She never told them what the song meant. You want them to have their summer, she says. You want them to feel free just once, before the world teaches them what it really thinks. She held her tongue, letting them chase the truck, but each mot was a small betrayal, a choice between protecting innocence and honoring truth. Mr. Leon Carter, who grew up in the segregated South, remembers the silence at home when the jingle played. His father would close the window and mutter that some things were best left unsaid. At church, the elders whispered about the tune's real name, but in public, no one dared make a scene. We were told not to ruin it for the kids, Carter says. But it ruined something in us, having to swallow that pain so everyone else could pretend. The dilemma was everywhere. Some parents tried to explain, their voices shaking, only to be met with blank stares or tears. Others kept the secret, hoping their children would never learn the song's history. Either way, the harm was done. The music that brought neighbors together also carved invisible lines between those who could hear only nostalgia and those who heard humiliation stitched into every bar. When Black parents spoke up, the world rarely listened. In the 1970s, a mother in Chicago wrote to her local paper, asking why a song that once called her people lazy and childlike still played for children's delight. The letter was dismissed as overreacting, ruining childhood for everyone else. Decades later, Dr. Daphne Brooks, a scholar of Black performance and trauma, describes the gaslighting that followed. Black families were told they were too sensitive, that it was just a tune, but that tune was a weapon broadcast on repeat, daring you to say it hurt. The emotional violence lingered long after the truck rolled away. Children grew up carrying questions their parents never answered. Some learned the truth in college classrooms or late-night internet searches, piecing together the history their neighborhoods had hidden. The realization landed like a blow. Memories of summer afternoons now shadowed by the knowledge that their joy had come at a cost. For every smile at the curb, there was a parent weighing an impossible choice. Speak and risk shattering their child's happiness, or stay silent and let the wound fester, hidden but never healed. The music promised belonging, but for Black families it also delivered a message. This country's innocence is built on your erasure. The song kept playing, and the silence around it became its own kind of harm. In the summer of 2020, as protests swept across cities and old symbols toppled, a corporate statement landed with the weight of a confession. Good Humor, the company whose name had become shorthand for the ice cream truck itself, issued a press release that called the tune "Turkey in the Straw," the jingle echoing through American neighborhoods for generations, irredeemable. The company's words were blunt. They acknowledged the melody's roots in minstrel shows and the 1916 recording that mocked Black Americans for white entertainment. For the first time, a major brand admitted what historians and families had whispered for decades. The song was not just outdated, it was a wound that never healed. But Good Humor did not just apologize. They decided to act. Instead of quietly dropping the jingle or hoping the controversy would fade, they reached out to someone whose music had always stood for reinvention and resistance. RZA, the founder of Wu-Tang Clan, answered the call. He grew up in Staten Island, where the ice cream truck's arrival was a daily event, and he understood both the joy and the pain stitched into that sound. RZA got to work in his home studio, building a new melody from scratch, one that could summon kids to the curb without carrying the weight of mockery and violence. The result was Favorite Treat, a jingle that swapped the old bounce for something fresh and unmistakably joyful. It kept the spirit of summer but left the baggage behind. Good Humor released the new tune for free, urging drivers everywhere to download it and let go of the past. In interviews, RZA explained his mission. We wanted to give kids something to dance to, something to smile about without the shadow hanging over it. The company's move sent ripples through the industry. For years, ice cream truck operators had clung to Turkey in the Straw because it was public domain, free to use, easy to recognize, and cheap to program into a music box. Good Humor's new jingle came with no licensing fees, no legal hurdles. It was an invitation to change backed by a simple promise: we can do better. The announcement did not erase the past, but it proved that change was possible. It showed that even traditions as old as the ice cream truck song could be rewritten. Good Humor's statement and RZA's music offered a new way forward, one that did not pretend innocence, but owned the truth and tried to make amends. For families who had listened to the old jingle with a lump in their throats, it was a small measure of relief. For everyone else, it was a reminder that the songs we play for children matter, and that history does not have to be destiny. Still, the work was far from finished. Good Humor could only control its own fleet. Thousands of independent trucks kept playing the old melody, either unaware of the new option or unwilling to change what customers expected. But for the first time, the choice was out in the open. The song at the curb was no longer just a backdrop, it was a decision. And with RZA's jingle ringing out on summer afternoons, a different future started to sound possible. Most Americans never learned the real story behind the ice cream truck song because the truth was kept out of sight and out of the classroom. In schools across the country, the history of minstrelsy is barely mentioned. Lessons might cover the Civil War or the Civil Rights Movement, but the ways racism shaped everyday culture through songs, cartoons, and jokes almost never make it into textbooks. According to education research, more than 80% of U.S. high school curricula skip over the role of minstrel shows in American entertainment. The story of Turkey in the Straw as a tool for mockery is left out, replaced by sanitized tales of folk music and summer nostalgia. Generations grew up humming the melody, never realizing it was once the soundtrack to blackface performances that dehumanized their neighbors. Dr. Antoinette Jackson, a public historian and educator, explained that this kind of omission is not an accident. When you erase the ugly parts of history, you protect innocence for some and deny truth to others, she says. It keeps people comfortable, but it leaves wounds unhealed. Her point is simple and painful. The truth is not incidental. The Equal Justice Initiative, a legal advocacy group dedicated to confronting America's legacy of racial injustice, points out that cultural artifacts like the ice cream truck song are rarely discussed in official lessons. Their research shows that fewer than 1 in 10 state standards include even a passing reference to minstrelsy or its impact on American life. This gap in education has consequences. In a Pew survey conducted after the 2020 protests, nearly 3/4 of Americans said they had never heard about the song's racist history. Even after Good Humor's public statement and RZA's new jingle, most parents and teachers did not know why the change mattered. The cycle continues. Children learn the melody as harmless fun, and the story behind it fades further into the background. The silence is structural, not accidental. It allows tradition to continue unchecked, and it leaves Black families carrying the burden of memory alone. But ignorance is not destiny. Change begins with small, concrete steps. Educators can bring this story into their classrooms not to shame, but to spark honest conversation. Parents can ask their schools to include lessons on cultural racism and the legacy of minstrelsy. Community leaders can invite historians or equal justice initiative representatives to speak about how songs and symbols shape the world children inherit. Anyone can share the story, post the facts, or start a neighborhood discussion. The Equal Justice Initiative's online resources offer free lesson plans and evidence packets for teachers who want to break the silence. Ours' new jingle, Favorite Treat, is available to any operator who wants to make a different choice. The power to change this tradition does not belong only to companies or politicians. It lives in every person who refuses to look away, who insists on teaching the full story, and who demands better for the next generation. The melody is still playing, but so is the chance to rewrite what it means. The first step is refusing to let ignorance be an excuse. Even now, as ice cream trucks circle neighborhoods, most still play a melody, born from ridicule and exclusion because it is cheap, familiar, and unchallenged. Each summer, that choice echoes across generations, shaping who feels safe in their own streets. Until we confront the legacies beneath our joys, innocence remains a privilege, not a birthright. What melodies do we let define us, and which truths are we finally ready to hear? Please share your thoughts below.